Arthur Brooks is the president of the American Enterprise Institute, one of the greatest think tanks in this nation, bipartisan but deeply focused on doing what's right, the morality of free enterprise. He's written 11 books. He's often quoted in the New York, or written articles for the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. He is one of the foremost authorities on the moral opportunity that we have to create a better America. And tonight, I'd like to welcome Arthur Brooks for the next 30 minutes to enlighten us, to inspire us.
Thank you so much. What an honor to be with you, to be with the people who make this flourishing state what it is in terms of business, in terms of free enterprise. Governor, congratulations on your success. Mr. Speaker, I enjoyed having supper with you. The extraordinary thing about Minnesota is that the Speaker said that you had a good governor, and they're not from the same party. That is the weirdest thing I've ever heard, because I join you from Washington, D.C., where I live, so you don't have to. We heard from Senator Franken, who couldn't make it tonight. I hope that you'll mention to him that I went to the trouble of coming to see you in person here tonight, even though we're more or less working in the same city. And I will tell you, as many of you know, that the place is racked with division and pessimism about politics. And there's a story about two Republican congressmen who've just left votes at the Capitol, a contentious set of votes at the Capitol, and they're walking down the street making small talk, old friends they are, and they're not really watching where they're going, and they notice that they've wandered in front of the national headquarters of the Democratic National Committee. For these guys, this is the heart of darkness. And they notice a sign in the window of the DNC, and the sign says, "Become a Democrat today, earn $1,000. One says to the other, "You don't think they're that desperate, do you? I mean, they're not paying people to become Democrats now." And the other says, "I tell you what, go in and pretend you want to join and see what happens." His friend says, "Fine, I'll do it." So he walks in, and the other congressman is waiting for him outside for 5 minutes, which turns into 10 and then 15. So he goes across the street and sits down on a park bench and waits, and an hour and a half goes by until finally his fellow congressman comes walking out. So he goes running up to him and he said, "So what happened?" And he says, "Well, I joined." And his friend says, "What? What do you mean?" He says, "Yeah, I joined. I'm a Democrat now. They made some very compelling points about economics and national security and social policy, and so yeah, I'm a Democrat now." And his friend says, "Weird, huh? So did they give you the $1,000? And his new liberal Democratic friend just looks at him with pity and says, "Is that all you people care about?" Now, I don't have a partisan point here. I actually have a point about what we care about in the world of free enterprise and in the world of business. I run the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C. We're fighting for your ethos, for your ability to do what you do, and to do so in a way where people understand all the good that you do. But sometimes even we forget the why. What is the why of the free enterprise system? That's what I want to talk about with you here tonight. The why, the moral case for free enterprise. And the moral case for free enterprise has an interesting beginning, at least it does so in my life. You heard from Scott that I actually had a winding path to becoming an economist, a president of a think tank in Washington. I started out as a musician. Actually, it started when I was 19, when I dropped out of college. Dropped out, kicked out, splitting hairs. And I went on the road playing music, and I finally found my way back in my late 20s. I got my bachelor's degree when I was 30, and I got interested in economics, and I learned something that really changed my life, something that you may or may not know. See, I had this lifelong question, this preoccupation, and it wasn't about how to earn profits. It wasn't why people become rich. It was, what explains poverty, and how can we have less of that? See, I remember when I was a little kid, when I was 6 or 7 years old, early 1970s, I remember the first time that I saw a picture of real poverty. Like many of you, I grew up under relatively modest circumstances, working class background in Seattle. And there were a lot of people on welfare in my neighborhood, mostly single parent homes. But it turned out that that wasn't real poverty when I saw this picture in the National Geographic. I remember it distinctly. It was a picture of a little kid in sub-Saharan Africa with flies on his face and a distended belly. You remember that picture too, or something like it. See, that had a big impact on me and you and on Americans, where we saw for the first time what true world poverty looked like, the face of it, our brothers and sisters. And the implication was clear. There was nothing I could do. I mean, I could give alms to the poor, my allowance on Sunday, but it wasn't going to do the trick. So I grew up, and I went to school and dropped out and started my family and my career, etc. And I often remembered that picture and wondered, what happened to that kid? Well, it turns out when I went back to school and I studied economics and business, I learned, not that kid specifically, I don't know, I learned what happened to the poorest people in the world since I was a child. Now, if you ask most Americans, has the world gotten poorer or richer since 1970? 70% of Americans will tell you that hunger is worse around the world. 70%. They're wrong. Here's what I learned. From 1970 to today, the percentage of the world's population living on $1 a day or less, that's starvation level, obviously corrected for inflation. The poorest people in the world, that percentage has declined by 80%. Since I was a child, in my adult lifetime, we've pulled 2 billion people out of starvation level poverty. It's the greatest anti-poverty achievement and the only true anti-poverty achievement in the history of mankind, and it happened during the lifetimes of virtually everybody in this room. Now, I bet some of you didn't know that. See, that's good news. That's not what they report. It's not a tragedy. It's a triumph. So you got to ask yourself, what did that? What made that 80% decline in the world's worst poverty? Because if we can figure that out, we can get the next 2 billion people out of poverty. Walk around Washington, D.C. and ask, and people will say things like, it was the success of the United Nations. Or it's practically a laugh line in Minnesota, I know. Or the International Monetary Fund, or the World Bank, or central planning, or something like that, right? Wrong, 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 wrong. According to all economists, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, a Republican, or a liberal or conservative, all economists understand that it was 5 things that pulled those 2 billion people out of poverty. It was globalization, free trade, property rights, the rule of law, and entrepreneurship. It was the American free enterprise system that started to spread around the world after 1970 for the very first time that pulled those people up. You know who built that? You did. See, alms for the poor are deeply important for our souls, to be sure. But if you want to get billions out of poverty, you have to have a system that works while you sleep, a system that takes your work and spreads the values of your work around the world so that people, when they see you, they say, I want that freedom, and I want that stuff, quite frankly. And so they throw off the shackles of their poverty and of their tyranny, and they live more like you, and they demand your values. And that's what people are doing today all around the world, because they see what you are doing. God bless you for that great miracle. The people in this room, in every little way, are responsible for somebody not going to bed hungry tonight. Somebody who's going to get an education for the very first time in a part of the world you're probably never even going to visit. What an incredible thing. Now, when I discovered this, it changed my life. I decided to dedicate my career to this truth so that we could get more of it. I believe in free enterprise because poverty is what I care about the most. I talk about this a lot. I have the wonderful privilege of speaking before audiences all over the country all year round. I do about 150 speeches a year. When you run a think tank in Washington, it turns out there's relatively little thinking in tanks. You're mostly talking to people about the good news, and on campuses a lot. I love speaking on college campuses, the future of our country, the brightest minds. And you know what? When they hear this, they don't say it's all nonsense. They say, that's great. I want to be part of that. I want to be part of the solution. See, we often think that on college campuses, people are antagonistic to capitalism and free enterprise and business. Not true. I say these things on campuses, and the kids say, give me some of that. I want to be part of the solution. But they often have a little qualm, a little discomfort, and I want to tell you what it is because it's important that we understand it. And here's how it goes. The kids come up and say, yeah, I'll be part of the movement, but I wonder, if all this abundance is good for the world, is it really good for me? Or is it maybe kind of a hamster wheel? How much should I dedicate my life to just making a lot of money? Building a business? Shouldn't I look for something deeper? I hear it all the time. I hear it from my kids. I used to hear it from my students when I taught at Syracuse University, and I hear it on every campus where I go. Now, should I dismiss that as naivete, as the entitled, spoiled nature of today's college youth? Before you dismiss it, or I do, I want to tell you about a study. It's a study from 2012 from two psychologists at the University of Rochester. And these two psychologists had an ingenious way of looking at people's goals in life. See, they wanted to see what a good life meant to people and whether or not they were happy, depending on what goals that they had. So they took 150 graduating seniors from the University of Rochester, and they were all about 22 years old, and here's the question that they asked them. Imagine yourself at age 27 in 5 years. Imagine yourself 5 years from now, and you're happy and you're successful. What does your life look like? Ingenious, right? Because then the kids are going to describe what's going on in their future selves when they're really happy and accomplished and doing great. What do they find? They basically found that the kids had two kinds of goals, and it was 50-50. Half the kids had what they called exogenous goals, and half the kids had what they call endogenous goals. Exogenous and endogenous. Why the fancy words? Because they needed to get tenure or something. Okay, so exogenous goals, what are they? They're about money. They're about prestige. They're about power. Half the kids, mostly men, but not entirely, said, 5 years from now, I want to be making more than my peers. I want to be successful in my job, and I want to be on track to be in the corner office. Effectively, that's what they said. The other half had endogenous goals, which was about people and relationships and love. Okay? So these, mostly women, but not entirely, said 5 years from now I want to have good friendships and a good relationship with my family, and I want to know God. And a lot of them said, I want to be married. Sounds sort of old-fashioned, right? Turns out, you take a lot of 22-year-olds and you get them under the hot lights, and some of them will say, yeah, I want to get married. Okay, so what happened? 5 years later, they followed up with all 150 of the kids about what was going on in their lives. And they found good news and bad news. First, the good news. Everybody hit their goals. You know, we often think that it's a kind of a crapshoot. Are you going to hit your goals? Depends. No, everybody hit their goals. The kids who wanted to make money were making more money than their peers. Their jobs were going well. They were working really hard. The kids who said they wanted good friendships and close relationships with their family had those things. And the ones who said they wanted to be married were either married or engaged, by and large. Remember when your mother said, careful what you wish for? It's true. Social science backs it up. That's the good news. Here's the bad news. Wrong goals, worse life. They found that the people who had endogenous goals about love and people and relationships, they had high levels of life satisfaction, high levels of happiness, low levels of anxiety. Those who chose the exogenous goals of money and success primarily before relationships, anxiety, stress, stomach aches, headaches, anger, not so good. Wrong goals, worse life. So before we dismiss the discomfort that kids in college have today about what they should do with their lives, we have to figure out how these two facts fit together. Abundance is what we need for the rest of the world. We need you and the jobs you create for the rest of the world. But we also have to take seriously our values and pass them on to our kids such that they understand that there's something that's more important than money. How do we mix those things together? How do we talk about it in the right way? How do we beat materialism while still understanding human dignity? So I had this on my heart 2 years ago. I was trying to figure out how to do it. I was going from campus to campus. I was traveling a lot. And I remember at the time I was going a lot to India. And I get to go to India a lot because we have a big India practice at AEI. We do India studies. And if you like free enterprise, go to India because it is the most exciting country in the world right now. So I was on the way to Delhi and I was with a scholar at AEI, a guy who works for me, who specializes in India. And I was unburdening myself. I said, man, I feel like I can't explain my philosophy because these kids, they keep poking holes in it. They keep showing this doubt. And he said, this guy, he said, when we get to India, I want to introduce you to a really great guy. Ask him this question. He has the answer. I said, what's his name? He said, his name is Swami Gyanmuni. And I said, you want me to go ask a Swami about capitalism? And he said, trust me. If Swamis were rated by Yelp, he'd have 5 stars. Which is meaningful to all of you under 40. So we got to Delhi, and I made an appointment with a Swami about a year and a half ago, actually, 2 years ago. And it was he's the administrator. He's a monk at the Swami Narayan Akshardham Temple in New Delhi. And if you've never been there, if you ever go to India, you have to visit this beautiful temple. It took 10,000 stone-cutting artisans full-time working for 7 years to build this temple. It's a wonder of the modern world. And I was marveling at it, but I have to say that I was worried because I was going to meet this Swami, and I didn't know if we were going to be able to communicate. I mean, he's going to speak English, but this is subtle stuff. So I was thinking, how should I talk about it? And I saw him coming toward me across this courtyard with his shaved head and his flowing orange robes, looking all mellow and meditative. And he cleared up the communication question immediately. Because he got about 3 yards away from me, and he stops and he says, how you doing? And I said, where are you from? And he said, Texas. So this is getting weird. I've gone to India to ask a Swami about capitalism, and he turns out he's from Texas. And I asked him to tell me his story, and it was interesting. See, it turns out his parents were petroleum engineers. They were immigrants to Houston, and that's where he was born. And his parents had, remember the term, exogenous goals for their son, money and achievement. They were very oriented toward his education and his success. He graduated from high school at 16. Valedictorian. He went to the University of Texas, full scholarship, graduated in 3 years, and went to get his MBA. Finished in 1 year and went to work for McKinsey, right? A great American company. His parents were very proud. He said he was working 90 hours a week and making money hand over fist. His parents were so proud of him. Now, that came at some cost. He didn't have a girlfriend. He almost never saw his family. As a matter of fact, he really didn't have time for friends so very much. But he was making it. He thought he was going to be partner by 30, which is a big deal in that industry. When he was 26, 6 years into his career, he said he woke up on his birthday and he asked himself, is that it? I mean, really? I don't have any friends. I don't have a girlfriend. I never see my parents. I have a lot of money. I'm working 90 hours a week. Is this the right path for me? And so he went on a vision quest. He was a very pious Hindu from a religious family, and he prayed about it every day for 6 months. He decided after 6 months he was going to make a decision about his life. And at the end of 6 months, he decided to sell everything and give all his money to the poor, to enter a seminary and become a monk, which he did. Now, I'm having this conversation with a guy, and I'm very nervous. Why? Because I'm about to ask him if capitalism is good. And he just gave it all up and sold everything he had and gave it to the poor. So what's he going to say? But I got up my courage and I said it anyway. Swami, is capitalism good? And he said, actually, he was calling me dude, by the way. He said, no, dude, it's great. It's the only force that has ever pulled millions of people out of poverty in the history of my country, by which he meant India, but by which he could also have meant the United States. And I said, well, now I'm on the other side of the equation. I said, yeah, but Swami, look at you. You own nothing except for prayer beads and a begging bowl for your food. You gave it all away. How can you say that money is not a problem? Doesn't it hurt your soul? And he said, dude, you don't understand. The problem in life isn't money. The problem is attachment to money. Now, this sounded really Eastern to me for a second, but it shouldn't have, right? I was not raised in a Hindu home. I was raised in a Christian home, and indeed, I'm still a serious practicing Christian. And let me tell you, the Christian scripture that is most often misquoted, for those of you who are Christians as well, you know that St. Paul in his letter to Timothy did not say that money is the root of all evil. St. Paul did say the love of money is the root of all evil. The problem is not money, it's attachment. Swami said, there's a formula for a happy life. Boy, was I all ears. He said, it's abundance without attachment. That's what we want to achieve. That's the sine qua non. Now you got to ask yourself, how come we don't all know this? By the way, it's every religious tradition. If you prefer the Old Testament, Ecclesiastes 5:10, he who loves money never has enough of it. Isn't that the truth? This too is meaningless. So you get this every place you look when you think about it. The question is, how do you achieve abundance without attachment? We're pretty good at the abundance stuff in this room. How do we achieve the non-attachment part of this equation? I'm going to give you two suggestions. I'm going to give you two practices, and I'm going to offer them to you with appropriate humility. But here's my guarantee. If you do these things, life is going to be better. Number one, practice number one of abundance without attachment. Think in your head the material thing to which you're most attached. Give it away. Charity is the physical act of detachment. It is your act of rebellion against materialism. For years, when I taught as an economist at Syracuse University, I used to do work on charitable giving. It was not just my hobby, it was my passion. It's such an interesting thing. I used to write books about who gives more, working people or retired people, rich people or poor people as a percentage of their income, Democrats or Republicans, et cetera. Those are the kind of questions that I would answer. But there was one thing that I kept finding in my data that was really weird to me, very strange. I kept finding that the more you give to charity, the richer you get. And I have the best data. I was cranking these regression results, which economists always do with their statistical software packages, et cetera. And I had data from thousands, tens of thousands of Americans across many years. And I kept finding the more people give, the richer they get. Now, you don't learn that when you do your PhD in economics, let me tell you. If you want to get rich, just give all your money away. That's not a sound investment principle. So I had a problem. I had a theory of economics that you should keep your money and invest it wisely if you want to get rich. And I had data showing that one of the ways to become more prosperous is to give charitably. So theory, data. So I did what college professors always do. I threw away my data. I just had my theory. But it was bothering me. I couldn't get it out of my head. So finally, I consulted a friend of mine who does work in the same area. He was a psychologist, a psychology professor, and I said, I have a weird problem. Here's my problem. I keep finding that the more people give away to charity, the richer they get. Now, I know that's wrong. What do you think I'm doing wrong? And he said, oh man, there's nothing wrong at all. We've been finding that for 30 years. I said, what do you mean? He says, we're not looking at boring things like how much money you make. We look at what's really important, which is how happy you are. And we know why, the more you give, the happier you get. And of course, people who are happier have lower stress levels, and they're more admired by other people, and so of course they make more money. And then the light bulb went on again. And I started seeing this result every place I looked. The more you give, the richer you get. The more you give, the happier you get. The more you give, the healthier you get. My favorite studies, by the way, show that the more you give, the better looking you get. It's true. There are these two guys who do studies on this at the University of Liverpool. And the study that they like to do is they bring men into the laboratory, and they have to come in with your wife, okay? So men and their wives, some guys have been married for a year, some guys for 50 years. And here's how it works. In the first building, you got the guy with a white lab coat, and he gives you a pocket full of change. And he says, simple, walk with the change and your wife from this building to that building. When you get over there, my colleague's going to interview you for 10 minutes, and you're done. Simple. So each couple starts out, pocket full of change, and they get between the buildings, and there's an alleyway, and a homeless guy comes wandering out of the alleyway, and he panhandles the husband. Hey, buddy, you got some change? The husband's got to make a decision. Do I give to the homeless man or not, and how much? Makes the decision, they go on to the next building. When they get to the next building, the colleague is there waiting to interview the husband and wife. To the husband, did you give the homeless guy some change? How much? To the wife, how attractive do you find him right now? Why? They want to find the correlation between how much you give to a homeless man and how much your wife likes you. And what do they find? The more you give him, the sexier she thinks you are. News you can use, guys. Do you want to be less attached? Then get into your head that to which you're most attached materially and give it away. That's principle number one. Practice number two. Stop thinking about the price of things and start remembering the value of experiences with the people that you love. Remember the endogenous experiences. Remember, the secret to your happiness is endogenous goals. Use your resources personally to develop better relationships with people through experiences. Years ago, I've been married, by the way, for 24 years. And 23 years ago, just at this time, my relatively new wife and I, we were in this knockdown, drag-out fight about how to celebrate our first wedding anniversary. And here's the problem. We had no money. My wife was working a minimum wage job, and I was trying to get my college degree. And so you look in the checking account, and there's tumbleweeds going through it. So we figured that we could just scrape enough cash together to do one of two things. Go away to the beach together for 3 days, or buy a couch. And we didn't have a couch. So this was the disagreement. My wife, who's from Barcelona, she's all about the beach. And I'm a thrifty, pragmatic American, so I'm all about the couch. You're from Minnesota, so you're on my side, I know. And we were going back and forth, beach, couch, until finally we came to a grand compromise, and we went to the beach. And years later, 20 years later, we were looking back on this, and what we learned was what psychologists call the paradox of things. See, if we'd gotten the couch, which we ultimately did, by the way, it would have been gone, and it was, 5 or 10 years later. I don't even remember the color, practically. I don't know anything about the couch, but I can tell you everything we did in every hour of that weekend away together for our first wedding anniversary. The paradox of things is this: what you think is permanent is not. What you think is evanescent is truly powerful and permanent. It's in the ether of your imagination forever. Want something permanent? Spend your money doing something with someone you love. That's a principle of non-attachment. It's also a principle of happiness. The most successful credit card commercial in the history of the industry is from MasterCard. You've all seen it. It's been running for 25 years. It's actually, I mean, you're so sick of it. You've seen it so often. And they all are the same. They recut them every single year, but it's more or less the same. There's a voiceover, and there's people doing something, and they're toting up the prices of stuff. Remember this? So there's a guy getting into the car with his kid, and it says, beach ball, $3. Gas for the car, $36. 2 nights in a hotel, $275. The weekend at the beach with my son. It's just an ad, but it speaks truth. That's why it's powerful, and that's why you remembered it. I could give you 12 studies or 1,200 studies, and I won't, that makes this point. I'll simply tell you how I learned this once and for all. I have 3 teenage kids. God bless me. And my middle son, his name is Carlos, and everybody all of you who have kids, everybody's got a Carlos. Carlos is a piece of work. Carlos is always running a scam, right? I mean, and the principal of the school calls last year and says, I'm sorry to inform you that your son is running an underground chameleon and frog selling business. How does that even work? It's always something with Carlos. And 6 years ago, he was 9, and he comes to me, it's in the fall, it's around this time, and he says, Dad, I've been thinking about Christmas. Now I'm immediately on the defensive. And I'm trying to divert his attention and change the subject. It's good to have Christmas in your heart all year round, Carlos. That sort of thing. No. He's having none of it. He says, Dad, you don't understand. I don't want anything this year. He said, I've been thinking about it. All I want is to go away hunting and fishing alone with you. And I was thinking, that costs 19 times more than a bike. Father of the year, right? But I didn't say that. I said, Carlos, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And we did it. And we've done it every year since. That's all he wants. That's all I want. Every year between Christmas and New Year's, Carlos and I go away alone hunting and fishing. And we think about it all year round. Last year, we went to Central Florida and we went wild boar hunting. And then we went off the southern coast near Naples and we went light tackle fishing for 2 days. Why do I tell you the details? Because they're in here permanently. And Carlos says, Dad, when you get older, thank you, I'm going to take you away every year for Christmas. See, that's the secret. The endogenous goals, the non-attachment that comes from the love that we have with one another. This is the secret. Abundance without attachment. And by the way, those two practices do not include lowering abundance. Do you want less attachment? Don't take things away from people simply because you can. Because I'm as sure as I'm standing here and as sure as you're sitting there, that will make poor people poorer. Capitalism doesn't work that way. If you want the abundance of free enterprise and lift us all up, everybody needs to win. That's how it works. That's the gospel that we've been able to spread around the world that brings so much good to so many other people that we don't even know. So here's what I'm asking you. I'm asking you to join me in basically a new philosophy that's not Democrat, and it's not Republican, and it's not right, and it's not left. It has two parts to it. Number one is, I need you to be warriors for your free enterprise values. It's very easy to be on the ropes. It's very easy to make apologies for the money that your companies make. Don't apologize, because the minute that you start to back up, somebody you can't see and somebody you don't know starts to suffer. And we can't afford that. It's not about us. The abundance is about people who are not in this room with us, but who are our brothers and our sisters. And we need to lift them up. And we lift them up with what you do. Free enterprise is good, and it's right, and it's just. And you're the ones who make it so. Fight for it. 2, we need to fight also for our values. We need to remember ourselves and share with others that it really isn't about the money, that it's about the love that we have with each other and the good lives that we want to live, which is really about the relationships that we're able to maintain. The non-attachment part is equally important. This is a new philosophy that goes beyond right and left, because it's a philosophy that spreads American goodness around the world and helps us to remember that our souls depend on not becoming materialists. If we can do this together, I can go back to Washington, D.C. and start seeing things getting better, because these are truly American values. Where do they start? They start in Minnesota. They start in businesses here. They start with those of you who love this place and love what you do and love your employees. And for that, and all the good it does in the world, for our brothers and sisters in need, and indeed for America and for my family, even though we've just met, my only words to you are God bless you in your work, and thank you.